And we are now live. Right, so we're all good to go. This is another episode of Jay's Big Chat with me, your host, Jermaine AKA Jay. And joining me to talk about the big topic that is mental health, we have Taylor and we have Alyssa. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me. This is a massive topic that I'm sure can't be covered in just one conversation, but we're definitely going to kickstart off with I guess the big question. And the big question is like, what does, when you hear the word mental health, what does that sort of how does that make you feel? Like, what does it make you think when you sort of hear that terminology sort of flying around the place?
I think for me, I still feel that like the negative connotation that comes with the word mental health and mental illness. And I think that's just a part of like our society. Like we're still destigmatizing it, and we're just beginning to be more open about talking about it. And for me, like it's been something that's really hard to accept because I've felt so much pain in the past.
Yeah.
So for like, I'm getting there. I being more open about talking about it, and even just like making my post was a huge step for me. Just to talk about my story, to explain, that there's no certain type of person that it happens to. It can happen to anybody. It's, it's something that we can't really control, but we can overcome. And I think the more that we're open to talk about it, that stigma will go away.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just incredibly important. And we need to focus on mental health the same that we do our physical health.
Agreed. Are you on the same sort of line, Taylor, or is it like something different to you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that we do need to put as much focus on our mental health as physical health, because it's not something that only happens to certain people. Mm-hmm. We are destigmatizing people that have certain mental health illnesses and things that they need to sort through, like anxiety or depression. Yeah. There's so many other things that affect your mental health. But then there is also that lighter side of mental health, where even if you don't have a mental health illness that can be diagnosed by a doctor, it's still something that you should be working on. It's, you should be working on your mental fitness and making sure that you are just as healthy mentally as you are physically. So I definitely agree that even though mental health awareness isn't as huge as it should be with everyone yet, that I definitely believe it'll get there. People will realize that it's something everyone needs and everyone needs to work on.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And you use the word everyone. And obviously I'm here in the UK. You guys are far, far away. So if you just sort of let the viewers know where you're sort of talking from now. And of course, this is based on your own experiences and people around you. And just so we can kind of gauge, the similarities in terms of culture and see if there's any sort of correlation between, a person's mental state and where they live and so forth. So, either one of you, sort of where you're from and your background and stuff.
Yeah. So I was telling Taylor and Jay earlier that I'm from California, but I've kind of lived all over the state. I'm currently living in California, but I do travel to Arizona and Utah a lot. I used to live in Florida because I worked at Disney there, and I used to live in Toronto, Canada. So I'm just all over the place. I've experienced different cultures. My family is actually from England. So I am first generation American. So which is awesome because like I can, just being on the East Coast versus here, the West Coast, like people are completely different. And, certain cultural things that are normal there are not normal here. So that it's cool to kind of get just like a glimpse of each culture. But for me, I think generally in the States, it's pretty much the same as far as mental health goes. But yeah, I like to travel a lot, and then I'm working and living in California. I work in special education, and then I work at Disney. So yeah, and for special education, I'm an instructional and behavioral assistant.
Yeah, I mean, just a point on the Disney, because I'm still a bit hung up on the fun job, which is working in Disney. Yeah, like do you find it like in terms of your headspace when you're working in Disney, do you find it easier to cope with your job than your other not so fun job?
I do think it's a good balance. There's times where like if I'm having like a depressive episode, or if I'm just feeling really anxious, sometimes it triggers it a little more just because we're performing and I have to like be out in a crowd, and I'm like, if I'm feeling really anxious, like that's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, but I think as far as like, obviously the happiest place on earth, just even if you're not feeling it, just kind of smiling and faking it does for a second make me feel better. And I think that's why like I love my job there so much, is because it's like an escape from reality, and I just feel happy in that moment performing. So, and then I think like they're obviously so different, but with my school job, just working with my students, like that brings me happiness when I see that they're progressing, or they didn't have behaviors today, or they didn't or just like simple things that I've been working on with them. When they finally achieve it, that's, to me, is so rewarding and so fulfilling, that like that's how I get my happiness at that job versus Disney. So they're two completely different things, but like, just that feeling of like going to work and like, I can make a difference in these kids' lives.
Yeah, that's definitely an important job, for sure. What about you, Taylor? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your sort of background?
Yes. So I was born in Texas, and when I was younger, we moved out to Reno, Nevada with my family. I spent about 16 years there, and I just came back here 4 years ago. In regard to different areas and whether or not people's mental health is generally different in certain areas, I definitely believe that's a factor. I think that has a little bit to do with certain things. Like Alyssa was saying, just cultural differences in different areas can have something to do with it, where if you grew up on the East Coast and, it's the normal to not wave to people on the street and really connect with strangers, or, people are just a little bit more, I don't want to say like cutthroat, but, like hardcore in some ways.
Yeah.
But then down in Texas, everyone's like, howdy, hey, what's up? It is going to be a little bit different, but I do believe there's a lot of other factors that go into it too, like just differences I've seen in my own life. Nevada, there's no pro sport teams there. And so the sports are a little bit different. There's a lot more individual sports. So in Texas, alternatively, there's always a sports team you can join. There's like dodgeball, softball, football, Australian rules football, all sorts of CrossFit gyms and everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that because of that, I've noticed that a lot of people here are a lot more prone to opening up with each other and talking with each other, connecting to each other, and just being more vulnerable with each other because you have that team mentality than when in Reno. And this could have been because it's been 4 years since I've been there, and mental health awareness is still on the rise since then. But I feel like while I was there, it was more, again, just individuals. Like it's a 24-hour city, casinos, call centers, ski resorts. There was camaraderie, but it just didn't feel very connected as it does here. So I do think like different areas and different cultures do play a part in that. And I think that connection really is huge because like Alyssa was saying, you know, even when she's feeling depressed and when you're depressed, you don't want to go anywhere. You want to hole up, you want to be in your cave. But she's happiest when she does actually go out and push herself to connect with people and be around people. So I think it definitely does play a role in it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because an interesting fact that I was sort of reading early on in the week was that obviously we all know that we're all different. We're all wired differently. And that got me thinking, I wonder how many sort of official types of, you know, and we use the word mental health disorders or, you know, whatever word you want to use. And there's around the 300 mark. And to me, that's a high number of whatever, you know. Does that number sort of shock you, or are you kind of not surprised that there's that many? What's your thoughts on that?
To me, I'm not surprised, just because depression, specifically in mental illness, is like, it's not black and white. Like it's just this gray area, and there's different types of depression. Like there's different things that trigger depression. I think, just to piggyback off of what Taylor said, we as people, we're not meant to be alone. We are meant to have a community and a support system, and just, you know, being on a team or being a part of a club or something, just to have that connection with people can really like bring you out of a funk, or bring you out, you know, because loneliness triggers depression a lot. And I think just the past year with the pandemic and, you know, not being able to socialize is, unfortunately, has triggered a lot of depression.
So just on that word depression that you're using, like, would you definitely say that it's not someone being sad? Like depression isn't someone just not being sad and
no, like, well, of course, you know, like when I tell people like, oh, I'm having a moment, or I'm feeling depressed, they're like, oh, just snap out of it. Oh, like, you're just having a bad day. You're just like, kind of just like, you know, sweeping it under the rug, like, oh, you're fine. Oh, like as if like I'm choosing it. And I'm like, believe me, I don't ever want to choose to feel this way, because it sucks. It's not fun. I don't like feeling this way. And it's not just about being sad. It's just like, you know, you do feel sad, but it's certain things over a period of time that keep triggering it happening. Or sometimes there's really nothing that triggers it at all. It can just happen. But it's, to say like depression, oh, you're just sad, I think is just kind of like,
I think that really just comes from, you know, some people not having a better way to describe the feeling you're going through, because it is so hard to describe that feeling of just like darkness, and you can't describe why you have it. Like Alyssa was saying, it can be triggered by things you're not even sure of. Just out of nowhere, you can be having a really, really good week, and all of a sudden you're just in bed for 3 days straight, and you have no idea why. And the best way you can describe it while you're in that situation, when a friend asks you, is, oh, I'm feeling sad, you know? So then people start to think like, oh, well, if you're just sad, you know, just be happy again, you know? So it might just be, for lack of better words, of being able to describe what we're feeling. Because honestly, the 300 or more mental illnesses, unfortunately, doesn't shock me at all, because we are all so unique in those feelings. And the feeling I get when I'm depressed might not be the same feeling that Alyssa gets when she's depressed. It's similar and it's having similar effects, but we're all so unique in all of our experiences, whether they're good or traumatic, in the way we were raised to deal with things.
Of course.
All of our education, everything put together that makes us who we are. That if you really finally diagnosed everyone with something, I think that we would all have something slightly different. So we do put it into groups, but your mental health and your mental illness that you have is your own, and it's going to be different from everyone else's no matter what.
I mean, interestingly enough, just based on what you're both kind of saying, when you're looking at, I guess, the number of disorders that are listed, right? You both can probably pick, you can probably pick from that pile and say, okay, I feel like I've got aspects of this, I've got aspects of this, I've got this. Oh yeah, no, definitely this, and so forth, right? And you've also probably come across people who may say the same thing. So they may be like, I've got anxiety, but it's not to the point where I'm not doing anything. I'm still living a functional life, but this aspect of I can't, for instance, talk to new people, or I can't go to new places, or whatever the situation is, so I can't ride in the public transport. So do you feel like, and I guess you can probably share any of your own personal stories or stories in which you've heard from other people. Do you feel like there is, and you mentioned it before, there is a snap out of it actual attitude to any of this? Like, is it possible to just snap out of it? Or is that completely, like, can you trick you? Do you know what I mean? Like, can you trick yourself to feel better, to get out there and as they say, try something new? And
I think just this is why, like, I really, really stress people going to therapy, because it makes a world's difference. It helps you just kind of break down what your triggers are, what type of anxiety or depression that you have, just speaking to somebody who's a professional who can be like, okay, this is like, this is triggered from that, and that's probably like, childhood trauma, or that, you won't know that unless you go to therapy, unless you talk to a professional about it, and you won't know how to snap out of it, or, you don't really snap out of it, but you won't know what your triggers are, or what proper ways are to kind of calm yourself down, or techniques that you can use, unless you go to therapy. You can obviously read about it online, you can read books, you can, do your own research, but I think it really just boils down to going to therapy to really understand. Like, for example, for me, there's times where, like, I can just feel anxious randomly. Like, I'll be sitting on my couch and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like, but a lot of it is social. So I get really bad social anxiety. And they're like, I'll have times where, like, I completely cancel plans. I'm like, oh, I have something, because, like, I'm just having a moment.
Yeah. Can you talk me through? Because I've heard people say, oh, they've got social anxiety, but, like, just from your point of view, like, what happens when you feel this anxiousness about a social setting?
So, like, for me, it's like a lot of physical. Like, I get, like, really rapid heart rate. I get, like, really sweaty. I get, like, if it's really bad, I get tremors, like, my whole body shakes. So for me, like, that's more just like, but like, in my post, I mentioned, like, going to therapy, but I also take medication, which was also a last resort. I was trying just to do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, first.
Yeah.
I didn't want to rely on medication, but it just got to a point where I was there, it was only working kind of. So I take a beta blocker, which helps with the rapid heart rate, with the, with the physical, because I think the physical makes it harder for me to calm down.
Okay.
So just that, combined with, like, techniques like breathing, or, like, just certain things that my therapist has taught me, that's helped.
Yeah.
Like, but most of the time it's like you feel like you, like, can't breathe. It's like you're like, I can't get air, I can't, like, it's like a tightness in your chest.
Yeah.
So that's just what I feel personally. For other people, it could be different.
Yeah. What about you, Taylor? Any sort of similar stories or experiences at all?
So I'm not going to say that I think that it's impossible to snap out of something. I don't like saying that anything is really impossible to do. I think that people may have found ways to just snap out of it, turn their life around 180. That's amazing. I definitely do agree with Alyssa on going to therapy, talking to someone, or even support groups where maybe someone can ask you certain questions or bring things up that you hadn't thought of in a certain way before.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things for me, not to necessarily snap out of it, but to be able to pull myself out of when I get into a depressive episode or I get anxiety, is a lot easier when I keep up with working on my mental health, even when I'm good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, personally, I'll get to a point where I'm really good. Life is going amazing. Everything is great. I'm happy. Things are happening. Opportunities, awesome. And I'm like, awesome. I'm good. I don't need to work on my mental health right now. And so I'll just stop doing these daily practices, meditating, reading, going to group. Some people, like even myself, will stop going to therapy because I'm like, I'm good. I don't need you anymore. This is awesome. High five, peace, you know?
Yeah.
And then slowly, if you don't do it as a daily practice and continually work on your mental health and making sure that you're still good, you can decline and you can go backwards and you can start losing all of those little tips and tricks and snap out of it that you've maintained for yourself. So I think that working on yourself even while you're good is so important. But then also having a plan in place, because when you're that low or you're trembling and you're in that spot, you know, have a piece of paper in front of you that says, this is what you need to do right now. Write it when you are good, because when you're that low, it is so hard to remember what you're supposed to do. You know, because it feels like the world is closing in. It feels like the walls are closing in. It feels like a very dark place.
Yeah.
And you're not going to remember everything that you have taught yourself to pull yourself out. So I think it does help to have a plan in place, have someone to call to let them know to come be with you, or a therapist, you know, something to do, something that will help you at least come out of it enough to get yourself back to connecting with other human beings so that you can be happy again.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is, and I sort of mentioned that at the start, it's a massive topic, and it's a massive topic. Just as if we talk about, you know, fitness, we can talk about every aspect of fitness, and it will be, you know, a never-ending conversation. I feel like when it comes to mental health, as big as the topic is, it's and as much as an awareness has been created, I'd say over the last couple of years, due to either devastating results in deaths or higher number of inpatients in hospitals and putting strain on whatever medical staff and so forth. Whatever the reason why awareness was created, and again, it could be, due to celebrities and it being more in the limelight and so forth. And it always just kind of baffled me as to, you know, the importance in which we kind of look at mental health. And I think you mentioned it as well, Taylor. You know, it's health, isn't it? It's just another part of us. And as you were talking about the things that you will do whilst you're trying to kind of get back on that even path, and then when you sort of get there, or even kind of, you know, rising up a little bit even more, you sort of then say, okay, goodbye therapy group, goodbye you who were helped, and then you sort of like, you feel okay, and then before you know it, you're true again. And it just sort of brought to mind, maybe it's something that we need to know ourselves to the point where we know who we are. We know not just our bodies, because, you know, being a fitness person, I know, okay, I can go X amount of days or weeks, not eating right, or not exercising right, or not sleeping right, and then my body's going to feel like this, and then I've got to put another 6 hours in the gym, or I've got to do another eating plan, or I've got to do this and so forth. So I know how to target, I guess, my fitness health, and it's the same for education. If I'm in IT, so if I don't keep up to date with the latest threats or the latest technologies out there, for so long I could be okay, and then before you know it, I'll go down. So I just feel like it's the same for your mental health. If you're not forever working on it, if you're not forever, being mindful of the traps that are currently out there, and you mentioned as well the triggers for yourself personally. If you've got an issue with being able to sort of abstain from, binge drinking, you're not going to put yourself in a situation where so I think it's definitely knowing yourself, but as you mentioned, it's at the right time, making sure when you do feel okay to say to yourself, you know what, actually I'm going to take some time to actually figure out, in my darkest days, how I got in, how I got out, as opposed to go, all right, well, onwards and upwards, off I go, and then you fall again, and you're just like, oh my gosh, wait, how do I get out of this? And it's a repeating cycle. So yeah, any sort of thoughts on how hard that may be, or is, or if it's not that simple?
I think that a lot of the things, because when someone says like just relax or just do this or just do that, and it can be very agitating because you're like, It's not that simple. And I can't say this for a lot of the mental illnesses, that yes, you do need more extensive therapy, and you need programs and inpatient and medicine and things like that. Yes, there are a lot of things like that. But I do agree with you on the fact that you do also, on top of those things, if you need those things, need to know yourself and, have that mind, body, and soul connection so that everything aligns and you're not fighting yourself. You're not thinking one way and feeling another, but you're completely in line with everything in life and everything matches up, because that just makes it easier to deal with the things that you have to deal with if you do need, more help from something like that.
And I think that's like, it's just it's similar, like your physical health and fitness. If, one day, like you work so hard and you're like, okay, well, I'm healthy. I lost the weight that I wanted. And then you stop working out, you stop eating healthy, and you're like, well, I got to my goal.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden a week later, 2 weeks later, you're like, why am I gaining weight?
Yeah.
Why do I feel sluggish? Why do I feel tired? It's because you stopped, and your mental health is the same. If you work so hard to pull yourself out of it, to get through it, and you get to a good place, and you're like, okay, like therapist, I don't need you. Books, I don't need you. Like, I'm good now. It's gonna be the same. Like, if you're not constantly keeping up on it, you're going to fall back. It's physical and mental health are so similar, and it takes
like, from what you're saying, a lot of discipline, consistency, and discipline. And I the one quote that keeps coming to mind is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because if we're so good and things are working so well, why are we all of a sudden thinking, okay, now I can change everything? No, if you're good, keep everything the same, keep on that path, keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, it's funny because, and just saying this, I definitely don't want to keep you guys, all day. So what I'll do is I'll just say a sort of final question, and you guys can, I guess we'll go into which is the one, if you can share maybe a particular time in which you were feeling sort of down, regardless of what the sort of mental situation was, and possibly how you managed to, I wouldn't use the word overcome, but how you managed to get above the point of that dark place, in which you can give individuals who may be watching some hints and tips of how to do that. But I just wanted to say as well that in regards to mental health, I'm a big believer in, although a fraction of the population have been diagnosed with particular disorders, I'm under the sort of thinking that every single one of us have some sort of mental health disorder, diagnosed or not. And some individuals, you can see it and you're like, you know, and I personally can relate to certain things, but from the outside, or not even that, sometimes you don't want to accept that you've got a disorder, or because of, as you mentioned, the stigma and the saying to people, oh yeah, I've got mental health issues, you know, and it just seems like a kind of go away in the corner and be part of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that is that's, or yeah, something that's accepted or hasn't been accepted. And it just, to me, it just feels like, listen, every single one of us have a life to live, and within on that path, on that journey, like, life happens, and things are out of your control. So whether it's traumas from a childhood, whether it's traumas from a relationship that you're in that you had no control over, from your parents, from, regardless of what it is, you know, from work, stresses of your own life. So I think regardless of who you are, along the timeline, things happen, and you definitely become out of sync with how, you know, things should run. So I think we're all definitely somewhere on that scale. So yeah, feel free to
I
share.
would say, like, I think literally everyone on this planet could benefit from therapy. Like, you don't even need a mental illness or any issues. I think just going to therapy, like, anybody, it's like having a life coach. I think everybody can benefit from a little therapy in their lives. Just trying to find balance from the day-to-day things and stresses of money, you know, paying bills, working, going to school, like things like that. Kids, it's hard, and sometimes you get so caught up that just having that person to talk to is beneficial.
Yeah.
And then for me, I think, like I mentioned before, so my mom had passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2017, and I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety like a couple years before that, but it really triggered me into kind of just like this downward spiral of depression, anxiety, and then for a moment I felt good again, and then I would go back. Like, it kind of just went back and forth. But just this past year, it, like, I think with the pandemic and just like life situations happening, just brought me like into like this funk. Like, I couldn't get out of it. Like, I just truly felt so hopeless and so like in such a dark place. And so I started going to therapy regularly again, and like she explains, like, okay, like this is what that's coming from, and kind of just like understanding myself a little better. And what, like, I think my changing point was just like, I got to a point where I felt so low that I was like, I'm tired of this. Like, I need to change. Like, something needs to change in my life. And I don't want to always be the victim. I don't want to be a victim of my circumstances, or, you know, like I'll always be grieving my mom, but like, I don't want that to just like have this huge hold over my life and myself. And it just kind of took something within me to like snap myself out of it and just say, okay, this is enough. I need to do something. So therapy, reading books, exercising, taking my health seriously has like made such a huge impact. Like, getting proper sleep, drinking enough water, things like that all work together. And that's really helped me. You know, and not unfortunately, but like, it got to a point where I did need medication, but it's what I needed, and it helped. And I think, like, just like Taylor was saying, getting to know yourself is crucial. You have to know everything about yourself. You have to know what kind of person you are to kind of remind yourself, this is who I am. You are not depression. You are not your anxiety. You know, you're affected by it, but it's not who you are. And you can pull through this. And that's just helped.
Wow. Yeah, that's it's easy to sort of sit here when you're not in a particular situation, or haven't gone through you know what you've gone through, and just sort of feel, I guess, the amount of power that it takes to even just get out of bed, let alone sort of say to yourself, all right, do you know what, this isn't going to be me anymore. Regardless of whether it took 6 months or 6 years, like getting to that point is a massive deal. So thank you very much for sharing that story. And it definitely hits. You know, we all go through different things at different times, and it's amazing. Thank you. Taylor, have you got any sort of, I guess?
Yeah, something that's been kind of sitting with me is what you said about, you know, some people not wanting to say that they have a mental illness. So they don't want to speak up because of that. They don't want to label themselves with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really feel for them, because I think part of destigmatizing mental health is speaking on it as if it is mental health or mental fitness rather than illness. Because we don't say, like, if you're not fit, we don't say that you're physically ill. You know, we just say that you're working on your physical fitness.
Yes.
I think part of destigmatizing that would be taking that away so that someone doesn't have to say, I'm ill. They're just saying, hey, I need to work on this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really feel for those people that aren't ready to speak up yet. And I hope that eventually they will, because I've been in that spot. And it's really, really hard when you feel like you don't have someone to speak up to. But I want everyone to know that there are like we've been saying this whole time on this call, it's something that everyone goes through. Everyone has traumatic experiences. Everyone goes through something. So whether it's diagnosable or not, you'd be surprised how many people outside your door are going through something or have gone through something. Yeah. You could walk up to a random group of people at the park, and I bet you anything, one of those people knows what you're going through or has had a friend or a family member that's going through the same thing. Now, what breaks my heart, though, is when people don't know that they have a mental illness, something that they might need help for or medicine, and they grow up in a situation where they're not taught to bring things up like that, because then, you know, first of all, they don't know that it's wrong to feel those things. So they feel like they're not normal, and they feel like no one understands, and they feel isolated. And that's where a lot of suicides come from, is from that feeling of like, this is just how I am and there's no way to get better. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, you know, just speaking up and reconnecting with people is so huge, because I've been through a little bit of both situations, and I feel very grateful that I've been through so much in such a short period of time in my life, because I feel like it is shaping me into someone that is able to connect with people on so many different areas of mental health, which is amazing. That's all I really want to do, is help people. But the first instance was when I was living in Reno, Nevada. I was in an extremely abusive relationship with someone. And first year was amazing. Great relationship. It seemed awesome. It was like, you know, he's the one, you know. So after that, I ended up dating him for 4 years, but year one was really the only good year. And very, very emotionally abusive, very physically abusive. I became isolated from my family. I felt like I didn't have any friends anymore. He would talk smack about my friends. None of them were good enough for me, but I wasn't good enough for him. So I was very, very isolated. And I got to a point where I just didn't want to live anymore. And I didn't want to be on this planet, but I couldn't tell anyone that. And, you know, couldn't tell him that, because in some weird twisted way, it would be my fault and it would spiral and all happen all over again. And so I was in this just dark pit by myself. And the way that I ended up getting out of that was through connection through Instagram. And a lot of people kind of knock social media as being silly or a waste of time. But honestly, it's this beautiful thing that brings all of us together where we can open up and be vulnerable with each other. And so I remember being in one of the darkest spots of my life, and I saw this post from a woman who talked about how she was in an abusive relationship. And I'm going through, I'm like, this is me, this is me. And at the end, she starts talking about how she got out of it and how she got stronger and she was able to get out of that spot. And it just like lit this fire inside me that I wasn't stuck. This wasn't the end. My life could keep going. And so she didn't provide instructions or anything on the post, unfortunately, but I was like, I'm not stuck. I can do what I want. And so I started working out and I started, getting fit. I started posting on Instagram. I started talking to all those millions of people out there that had gone through the same things. And just that one post gave me enough strength to know that, I wasn't stuck in that situation.
Yeah.
And so I think just like reaching out to people and finding that connection, opening up even when you don't want to. And maybe sometimes you don't want to open up, but some great advice that was given to me is just get someone next to you. Like we need to stop being so ashamed of this thing that we all have. And we need to wear it as a badge of honor and say, look, I need you right now. I need you to come over. And I know that sometimes when you're depressed and you're in that spot, at that point, I was not showering. I was not taking care of myself. I was not cleaning the house. It was disgusting and I felt disgusting. And part of the reason I probably didn't reach out to anyone was because I didn't want anyone to see that I was like that, because I didn't want to be more ashamed of what I was going through.
Of course, yeah.
So I think that we need to just, accept that this is something that we all go through and not be ashamed of where we are and claw and climb our way out of that pit any way we can and find someone to connect with.
And I think just, again, like reiterating, like having a community and a support group, so like people that are there for you. But just with the Instagram posts, that's a huge reason why I decided to post my story. And there were so many times like I had it written out. I was like, oh, I shouldn't, like, this is too much. And it got to a point I'm like, you know what, I shouldn't be ashamed of it first. Like, I don't, why should I be ashamed of it? Why should I feel weird or bad about, like, these are my experiences. This is my truth. This is what I'm going through. And by posting it, what if this helps somebody? What if this has the potential to resonate with somebody and them reading it, just going, I'm going through something similar. And
of course.
He's working on it. I can do it too. Like if it can give anybody hope, then that makes me happy. So that was ultimately what made me decide to post it. And I've only told a handful of people what I've been going through, and then the people who have experienced life with me, like who know my story personally, but I've never shared it with anybody, especially Instagram and the public. So that was terrifying for me. But I think, just by you coming across a post, it helped you. I hope that my post could be that for somebody.
And it definitely will be, whether it's 2025 or 2045, it's going to be there, so like I came across both of your posts, and it's weird, isn't it? Because as you mentioned, for a very long time you may have said, all right, I'm going to do it now, and with so many things in life we do that. We're going to do it now, we're going to start now, we're going to do that tomorrow, and then you just sort of push it to the next day, but when you finally do and it's done, that's the hardest part. After that, it's quite rewarding to know that the both of you would stumble across an Instagram post, and it will be the beginning of where you are now. And again, even just sharing your story now can be the beginning of someone's journey. based on what you've said. And it's always light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it, that people are looking for. When you realize, actually, I can't see no light, I can't see no hope. We think that, we have no friends. And for some people that may be true. Some people, we may not have friends or associates or family nearby, but in the deepest, darkest times in your life, when you can just pull out your phone and scroll up to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or a social media platform and come across the post, and you read it and go to yourself, oh my gosh, like, it isn't over, as you said. And that could be the start. It's a massive thing. So it's very, very interesting. And
I do want to say too, one thing that's helped me out a lot, something that I found once I did move to Texas to get away from that relationship, is I know a lot of times opening up to someone or reaching out to someone, because of that shame we feel, and we're not going to be able to just delete that immediately. There's a website called heartsupport.com, and you can go on there 24/7 and anonymously post what you're going through.
okay.
And that's really great, because a lot of people don't reach out to their family or friends because they don't want them to know, or they can't tell them the whole story for some reason,
Yeah.
or they think that they'll be judged for it, or maybe they don't have friends and family. And so you can go on their website, post it anonymously, and people from all over the world 24/7 can provide encouragement, support, write you back, literally just say, I love you and I hear you, things like that. And it's so helpful. And I've definitely gone on there several times just to, let it out. And I feel like by letting out your story, whether it's Instagram or heartsupport.com, you do end up processing it a little bit and finding out a little bit more about yourself, which, as we talked on here before, getting to know yourself really, really helps. So you get a little bit deeper each time you do share that story.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think what I'll do is, we're just at the end of the talk now, but I will grab that address, that website from you as well, and I'll stick it in the description. I'll also add a couple, like the Good Samaritan and so forth, in there. And if you guys have any more, I'll just put them on the description. And of course, depending on where individuals are watching this from, I'm sure they can find, and I'll look for a couple that's, I guess, more universal. But let's just leave the viewers with some positives. So if you would just like to say your final piece on maybe some hints and tips of how to deal with any form of mental health, and then then we'll wrap it up.
For me, it's just, even though you feel like you're in a dark place, just know there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and just like, you will get through it. It may seem impossible at the time, but it's there. And I think just know who you are, and constantly remind yourself who you are, what your worth is, what your value is. If you have to write a Post-it note and stick it on your mirror to remind yourself every day, do it. It really helps in just knowing yourself and believing in yourself. And that's what gets me through it. So I think that's just, yeah,
that's perfect.
I agree with Alyssa. You are so worthy of everything. You are so loved by everyone. You are worth every hard step it's going to take to keep going, but you need to keep going, because everything is temporary. These feelings are temporary. I know it doesn't feel like they are. I know I've been there. It doesn't feel temporary. It feels stuck, but you are never stuck where you are. You can always do little things to get a little bit closer to being genuinely happy. So whatever you can do to get there, whether it's going on this site and honestly, or calling someone that you really don't want to call because you're a little bit ashamed, please do it. Reach out, do whatever it takes, because you will be happy one day. I just know it.
Thank you. And I think those are amazing words to sort of, to leave with people. And we know that, there will be individuals watching in similar situations. And it's reassuring and refreshing to know that there definitely, as I said, is light at the end of the tunnel. And thank you both very much for openly sharing your stories and giving so much insight on something that is, something that is a massive topic. But I think it is a massive topic. I think it's something that I guess as not just as a country, but as a world that we're trying to address. But maybe we just need to put the gas on just a little bit more in addressing it, because it's definitely a number one killer in so many different ways. Maybe not physical suicides, but definitely a killer for families and also careers and just life in general. So we just want to thank everyone for watching, and until the next time, take care, guys.
Bye.